There's been a vicious backlash to the removal of the Confederate flag in many southern states, and some ultra-conservatives have apparently had enough. So listen to this hashtag that took off over the weekend. It says, Southern Lives Matter. Now, some might say, well, what's wrong with that? I don't see a problem. They're just saying, hey, we count too. And that's a fair point, but the problem is the implication that they're under attack in the first place. You know where the Black Lives Matter hashtag came from and where the movement came from? The black people repeatedly and systemically getting gunned down by the police when they're not armed. That's where it came from. A history and a litany of examples of all-out abuse against black people across the country. That's where the Black Lives Matters movement came from. It grew out of a real feeling of, sense of oppression. It grew out of a feeling that there's systemic racism still in the system that ends up affecting people in a very negative way. So there's a reason for it, a real reason. It wasn't, a phantom perception of something that didn't exist. In the case of hashtag Southern Lives Matters, well, that is a phantom perception. It's, we're being held down. Yes, I know. White people in the South, forever. I mean, remember that time that you guys were enslaved? That must have sucked. Remember the time that there was segregation enforced to put you down and you had less resources for your community? I remember that, right? Don't you remember that? Remember when there was those anti-white Jim Crow laws? Yeah, it was terrible, man. See, the issue is nobody's attacking Southerners. What we're doing is we're attacking the symbols of the openly racist Confederacy. Why would you feel the need to defend that if you're not racist and you're not pro-Confederate? That's my question for all these hashtag Southern Lives Matter people. It's like, why are you getting so defensive? We're only saying take the Confederate flag down from state houses. Why are you getting defensive? The only thing I could think of is that you secretly agree with what it stands for, and you're secretly pro-Confederate. And actually, it might not be so secret, and we'll get to that in just a second. But here's just the beginning of the issue, because in Alabama, we saw this. So this is what I was just referencing. They're not even hiding the fact that they're pro the Confederacy. They're just pro the Confederacy. And by the way, to give you a better case of history here, a better explanation of the history in question here, that flag is an offshoot of what the original Confederate flag was. See that what is this Confederate flag? It used to be part of the Confederate flag. So the Confederate flag was a little bit more complicated because that part was there, and then there was another area to it. But now this became basically the new Confederate flag. And the reason why this one was erected was in direct response to the civil rights movement and in direct response to desegregation. So this came back specifically as a fuck you to black people. And now they're flying it and they're saying, Southern Lives Matter. Well, you're not under attack, you assholes. You're attacking black people. That is perfectly clear. So hundreds of people were protesting, and you might say, well, Kyle, you're making this a bigger deal than it is because it's a tiny fringe. Well, first of all, let me say it's mathematically true that, of course, a tiny fringe of people were out there actually flying the Confederate flag and protesting in favor of it. But then we also learned this from NPR. Quote, investigators probe fires at 6 black churches in 5 southern states. So North Carolina, Tennessee, Georgia, northern Florida, all throughout the South, since the Charleston terror attack of Dylann Roof, black churches have been burned. Okay, 6 of them, 6 black churches in 5 southern states, 6 of them. I know of no other way to interpret this other than they're under siege. Black people are under attack in America. Just imagine for a second. Step out of whatever bias you might have, whatever context you might have, and just imagine it was a jihadist organization that was in America, and they had burnt down 5 churches in 6 states in like a week and a half time span. What would the reaction be in America? Oh my God. I think we all know we would lose it. we would basically morph into the Denzel Washington movie, The Siege, where they declare martial law immediately. They want to invade all these different countries. They do internment of Muslim Americans. I honestly think something like that or very similar to that would happen in America if there were 5 jihadist attacks within the past week and a half. But when it's neo-Confederates, when it's white supremacists, the media hasn't even covered this in any serious detail. I'm not kidding. I only have seen stuff about this on so-called alternative media sources, online sources. You don't see anything in the mainstream media. Why? Why are you not covering it? Now understand, I'm not saying we should flip out and do like internment of racists. That would be crazy. But what I am saying is, why are we not being objective and evaluating the situation when it's Muslim terrorism and Confederate terrorism the same? Why are we not at least covering it the same amount, having the same kind of level of outrage and response to both these things? That's not happening. It's almost like the white supremacists and the racists, while certainly they didn't get a pass with Dylan Roof, although they didn't call it terrorism either, they're not discussing the most recent ones that happened. It's just not discussed. Whereas, again, if it was a jihadist attack, they would fucking be, oh, I'm ready to flip out, go crazy, invade fucking 18 Muslim countries. You know that's what would happen, man. Even if you're not inclined to believe this to begin with and your bias is in another direction, you know that's what would happen. Now, some people say, well, those aren't connected, those burnings. Right, just like, the 3 ISIS terror attacks in one day on Friday overseas. Oh, those weren't connected either. I don't believe that. I told you, Daily Beast had an article arguing that for the ISIS terrorist attacks. I don't believe it. I didn't believe it. I told you I don't believe it. It's not a coincidence. ISIS attacked in 3 places in one day. So it doesn't just happen like that. By the same token, 6 fucking churches don't get burned down in America, black churches, and there's no connection, it was an electrical failure. Shut the fuck up. You know that's not true. And in conclusion here, I'll also just tell you this. There's an article out today in Raw Story. The leader of one of the groups that Dylan Roof cited as, his racist inspiration, he says the attack is, quote, a preview of what's on the way. This almost seems like a white supremacist jihad, a neo-Confederate jihad, doesn't it? And The Guardian is reporting that white supremacists apparently have infiltrated the U.S. military. They say there's like a couple hundred of them or something, and the real revelation in that story is the Army kind of knew. As long as it wasn't like, hey, you have a history of lynching black people, or it wasn't too overt where you have a swastika on top of your fucking head, those people, they would say, we can't have you. But they do mention in the article, hey, if you have a swastika tattoo in like a hidden place and it's a little one, they go, let them go. And they also say they're fair, and they say, hey, a lot of that has to do with the fact that we had so many fucking wars going on and we keep needing more and more soldiers. So that's part of it. But they did just let the white supremacists slide through. By the same token, the Christian dominionists, who are basically really the Christian Taliban. They believe Christians should have dominion over the entire earth. They're also in the military. Now, that's a separate group, and that's a separate story, and we could discuss that on another day. But they say neo-Nazis, KKK, there are plenty of white supremacists in the military. And, the Army's like, what are we going to do? What are we going to just go after them? I don't know what it is. Well, I do know what it is. A lot of it is racism. But when there's homegrown terror, and it's a white person doing the terror, it's neo-Confederate, it's white supremacists, we really do have a different response. Even the FBI said, don't call what Dylan Roof did terrorism. Why? It fits every definition of terrorism. Every definition of terrorism. You and I both know if it was a jihadist, we would be responding differently. Here's what I would like us to do. Be as objective as possible about the terror threat. By the way, as I've said time and time again, if I'm in Iraq, if I'm in Syria, if I'm overseas, I am more concerned about Muslim terrorism than right-wing terrorism. I just am. If I'm in America, though, facts are facts. I'm more concerned about right-wing terrorism. Now, you could say, yeah, well, Kyle, only 1% of the American population is Muslim. Yeah, that's true. So you could say disproportionately there's still more Muslim terrorist attacks if you account for the size of the population. Yeah, okay. But as a raw number, who does more terrorism in America? The right-wingers, right? So why the fuck, if you're in America, would you not say, we need to focus on this a little more, man? We need to focus on it because it's in our face. And they feel under siege because we dare to take down the sign of slavery and segregation from state capitals. Think about how deeply entrenched this system is in white supremacy. If they get angry over that, You can't even take it down from the fucking state capitol. Black people pay taxes that fund that state capitol. You can't take down the symbol of slavery and segregation. Can't do it, can't do it. We're going to do it. And you're going to watch us do it. And also we need to step up our tracking of you through legal means, of course. You go to a judge, you get a warrant and all that stuff. But we need to step up our monitoring of these groups because they are a bigger threat in America, and it's just a fact.